The rise and fall. Derek Brown sat in his office at Silvertech, staring out the window with a sense of pride and satisfaction. For 5 years, he'd poured his heart and soul into this company, transforming himself from a junior software developer into one of the leading talents in the tech division. His contributions were undeniable: innovative algorithms, cutting-edge solutions, and countless hours spent troubleshooting problems that others couldn't solve. Derek wasn't just an employee. He was a driving force, the kind of person who believed that merit and hard work would always be recognized. But as Derek climbed the corporate ladder, he noticed subtle, uncomfortable shifts in how he was perceived. His boss, Mark Gray, a middle-aged man who prided himself on his old-school approach, seemed to look at Derek differently than he did the other employees. Mark's interactions with Derek often felt strained, his compliments tinged with veiled sarcasm or an offhanded remark that left Derek questioning his place. The pivotal moment came during a high-stakes board presentation. Derek had spent weeks preparing, honing every detail to perfection. The room was filled with Silvertech's top executives, and Derek's presentation went flawlessly. He fielded questions with precision, anticipating every possible concern. When he finished, his colleagues erupted in applause, and for a brief moment, he felt a deep sense of accomplishment. As the room emptied, Mark pulled Derek aside with an expression that lacked warmth. "You might want to rethink your appearance, Derek," he said, his voice coated in a mocking tone. "People like you don't quite fit the image we're trying to project here at Silvertech." The words hit Derek like a slap in the face. People like you. He understood exactly what Mark was insinuating. Derek was the only black man in the room, and despite his achievements, his appearance, his natural hair, his choice of attire, seemed to make him an outsider in Mark's eyes. Derek wanted to push back, to demand an explanation, but he held his tongue. He knew that confrontation could jeopardize his career, and he hoped that if he continued to excel, Mark would have no choice but to accept him. Yet things only worsened. Over the following weeks, Mark's criticisms became more frequent and more personal. Derek's hair, his manner of speech, even his calm demeanor in stressful situations were all scrutinized under a microscopic lens. Every interaction with Mark left Derek feeling more isolated and judged, like his presence was a blemish on the company's pristine corporate image. Finally, Derek received an email summoning him to HR. When he entered the sterile, cold office, the HR manager avoided his gaze, reading from a prepared statement with robotic detachment. "Due to non-compliance with corporate appearance standards, we are terminating your employment effective immediately." Derek felt a mixture of shock and rage. His achievements meant nothing in the face of their biases. He walked out of the building where he had once felt a sense of belonging, a place he had given so much of himself to, feeling utterly humiliated. For the first time in his life, he realized that his skin color had been used against him in the very arena he thought was governed by merit and achievement. That evening, Derek sat in silence, wrestling with the injustice of it all. His dreams, his hard work, had been discarded not because of his abilities, but because he didn't fit their narrow image of who belonged at the company. As he watched the city lights flicker outside his apartment, he felt his sense of purpose begin to shift. If Silvertech could treat him this way, who else might they be targeting? And if he allowed this injustice to go unchallenged, what message would it send? But in that darkest hour, a spark ignited within Derek. This would not be the end of his story. It would be the beginning of something far greater. The long road to justice. The days following Derek's dismissal were heavy with despair. Job applications went unanswered, and interviews that started with enthusiasm quickly turned cold as soon as his employment history at Silvertech came up. It was as though the label non-compliant had branded him, casting doubt on his professionalism and character. The rejection stung deeply, but each refusal added fuel to Derek's growing determination. Derek's wife, Lauren, was his rock during this time. A fierce advocate for equality, Lauren had always admired her husband's strength and integrity. She refused to let him see himself through the narrow lens his former employers had cast on him. "They don't define you, Derek," she insisted. "You have to fight this, not just for yourself, but for everyone else who might be in the same position." Her words hit home, resonating with the part of Derek that had always believed in standing up for what was right. Encouraged, he began exploring his options, consulting with a lawyer who specialized in workplace discrimination cases. Derek's lawyer advised him to gather evidence, to document every instance of Mark's behavior and the unwarranted scrutiny he had endured. It would be a difficult, uphill battle, but Derek knew it was one worth fighting. Derek spent days reaching out to former colleagues, many of whom had witnessed Mark's actions or had overheard his disparaging remarks. To his surprise, several people stepped forward, willing to testify about the toxic environment within Silvertech's walls. Some of his former coworkers, who had also experienced subtle forms of discrimination, felt inspired by Derek's courage and joined him in shedding light on the pervasive biases that had plagued the company for years. As the case began to take shape, it attracted the attention of the media. Derek's story resonated with a public that was increasingly aware of systemic discrimination in the workplace. News outlets reached out, wanting to cover his journey. His face appeared in newspapers, his story retold in interviews, each one painting a stark picture of the injustice he had endured. Public opinion began to shift, and pressure mounted on Silvertech. The company's carefully cultivated image was starting to crack under the weight of Derek's story. Messages of support flooded his inbox, with people from all walks of life reaching out to share their own experiences or simply to offer words of encouragement. Yet even as the case gained momentum, Derek remained focused on a broader mission. This wasn't just about reclaiming his reputation. It was about changing the very fabric of corporate culture, challenging an unjust system, and paving the way for others who might one day face the same battles. Derek's resolve was tested daily, as Silvertech's legal team fought back with everything they had, attempting to discredit him at every turn. But each time he faced a new hurdle, he remembered Lauren's words and the countless people who were now looking to him as a beacon of hope. With a quiet, steely determination, he pressed on, knowing that the truth was on his side. And while Derek's fight for justice continued in the courtroom, something else was stirring in the background, an opportunity that would change his life in ways he could never have imagined. The unexpected opportunity. As Derek's lawsuit against Silvertech gained traction, so did his profile within the corporate world. His story wasn't just a tale of individual resilience, but had evolved into a rallying cry for diversity, equality, and accountability. News outlets covered updates on his case with fervor, and online communities buzzed with discussions about the systemic biases that often plague corporate America. For every obstacle Silvertech's lawyers threw his way, Derek's resolve seemed to grow stronger, bolstered by the knowledge that he wasn't alone in this fight. Yet the strain was undeniable. Derek's days were spent in preparation and consultations, combing through documents, gathering testimonies, and working tirelessly with his legal team. His nights, however, were often quiet and lonely, as he wrestled with the emotional toll of reliving the moments that had led him here, the veiled slights, the microaggressions, the sting of his dismissal. Even with Lauren's unwavering support, there were times he questioned whether he had the strength to keep going. But he knew that if he backed down, Silvertech would feel emboldened to repeat their actions with others who might not have the resources to fight back. Then, in the midst of this whirlwind, an unexpected email landed in his inbox. The subject line read, "We see your potential. Let's discuss your future at Technova." At first, Derek thought it was a mistake or some sort of recruitment spam. But as he read through the email, his skepticism melted away. Technova, one of Silvertech's biggest competitors, was reaching out to him with a unique proposal. The email was from Sarah Martinez, Technova's chief people officer. She had followed Derek's story closely, and the message conveyed a level of understanding and empathy that Derek hadn't anticipated. She acknowledged the struggles he had faced at Silvertech and emphasized that Technova was committed to building an inclusive workplace where everyone's talents and contributions were valued, regardless of their background. She invited him to meet with her and the company's executive team to discuss how he might fit into their vision for the future. Curiosity piqued. Derek agreed to the meeting. Within a few days, he found himself in Technova's sleek, modern office building, where every detail exuded a progressive, forward-thinking culture. Unlike the cold, clinical atmosphere at Silvertech, Technova's headquarters felt warm and inviting. The walls were adorned with artwork from diverse cultures, and as he passed through the halls, he saw employees of all backgrounds engaged in animated conversations. Sarah greeted him personally, her smile genuine and her demeanor down to earth. She led him to a conference room, where several members of the executive team waited. The meeting began with introductions, and Derek was struck by how each person seemed genuinely interested in hearing his story, not just the headline-grabbing aspects, but the subtleties, the small details that had shaped his experiences. After he shared his journey, Sarah leaned forward and said, "Derek, we're not just interested in your technical skills, though we know they're impressive. We're interested in you as a person, in your values, your resilience, and what you stand for. At Technova, we believe that the strength of our company comes from the diversity of our people and the inclusivity of our culture." She paused, giving Derek a moment to absorb her words. "We'd like to offer you a position as our new Senior Director of Innovation. This isn't just about filling a role. It's about empowering someone who understands what it means to overcome barriers. We want you to help lead our team and shape the future of our tech strategy." Derek was floored. He had prepared himself for a standard interview, maybe a tentative offer if things went well. But here they were, offering him a prominent position with significant influence, a role that would allow him to drive meaningful change from within. Yet even as he felt the thrill of this opportunity, a shadow of doubt crept in. Accepting a high-profile role at Silvertech's competitor would likely escalate his lawsuit and turn it into an even more publicized battle. Was he ready for the potential backlash? And could he balance this new responsibility with his ongoing fight for justice? Sensing his hesitation, Sarah spoke up. "We know you're still in the middle of your legal battle with Silvertech, and we respect that completely. We're willing to support you in any way we can, even if it means waiting until your lawsuit is resolved. You deserve justice, Derek, but you also deserve a chance to continue your career in a place that respects you." The sincerity in her words touched him deeply. For the first time in a long while, Derek felt seen, not just as a legal case or a symbol of corporate injustice, but as a human being with aspirations, challenges, and a story that deserved to be heard. After careful consideration and heartfelt discussions with Lauren, Derek decided to accept Technova's offer. He knew the road ahead would be challenging, balancing his new role with the ongoing lawsuit, but he was invigorated by the chance to rebuild his career and prove that his worth went far beyond Silvertech's narrow-minded judgments. Building bridges and breaking barriers. Settling into his new role at Technova wasn't without its challenges. Derek knew that his arrival came with a certain degree of attention. Many employees recognized him from news stories, some even admiring him for taking a stand against Silvertech. But he didn't want to be seen solely as the guy who sued his former company. He wanted to prove himself on his own terms. In his first weeks, Derek threw himself into his work, leading brainstorming sessions, refining project strategies, and pushing his team to think outside the box. Technova's culture was a breath of fresh air. Here, his ideas were met with open minds, and his presence was valued. He quickly found that Technova wasn't just paying lip service to diversity and inclusion. They actively fostered it. Employees of different backgrounds and perspectives worked together seamlessly, each voice respected and acknowledged. One of Derek's primary goals was to implement a mentorship program for underrepresented talent within the company. He remembered how isolating it could feel as a black man in a predominantly white industry, especially without mentors who understood his unique challenges. This program would pair junior employees with seasoned professionals who could offer guidance, support, and encouragement. As the mentorship program gained traction, Derek found himself mentoring a young intern named Malik. Malik was talented, but he struggled with the same insecurities Derek had faced early in his career, feeling like he had to work twice as hard to prove himself. Derek recognized Malik's potential and made it his mission to help him thrive. Together, they worked on a project that would optimize Technova's data management system, an ambitious task that showcased Malik's skills. Through this mentorship, Derek began to see the impact of his efforts, not just on Malik, but on himself. Empowering others to overcome the very challenges he had faced brought a renewed sense of purpose. His work at Technova was transforming him from a victim of discrimination to a leader championing change. Meanwhile, Derek's lawsuit against Silvertech continued to build momentum. Public support had only grown, with advocacy groups and social media voices amplifying his case. Silvertech's attempts to deflect and downplay the accusations were no match for the overwhelming evidence and Derek's unwavering determination. Then, unexpectedly, Silvertech reached out to negotiate a settlement. They were prepared to offer a substantial sum, along with a statement acknowledging the discriminatory practices Derek had endured. It was a tempting offer, a chance to close this chapter and focus solely on his future at Technova. But Derek hesitated. He wasn't in this fight for a quick payout. He wanted accountability, real change, and assurances that Silvertech would address the underlying issues within their corporate culture. After consulting with his lawyer, he declined the offer and insisted on a public apology, along with commitments to revamp their diversity and inclusion policies. Silvertech's reluctance to concede sent shockwaves through the media, and their reputation continued to erode. Derek's bold stance reminded everyone watching that justice was about more than compensation. It was about integrity, respect, and the right to be treated with dignity. As Derek reflected on his journey, he realized that this fight was no longer just about him. It was about Malik, about his colleagues at Technova, and about countless others who deserved to work in environments where they were valued for their talent, not judged for their appearance. The power of resilience and redemption. As Derek continued to settle into his role at Technova, the weight of his past struggles transformed into a source of resilience and strength. His lawsuit against Silvertech was nearing a climactic turn, and the company's refusal to apologize publicly had turned the legal battle into a cultural lightning rod. Activists, media outlets, and even former employees who had faced similar discrimination rallied behind Derek, making his story a symbol of resilience against systemic racism. In his new position as Senior Director of Innovation, Derek's responsibilities grew, and so did his influence. He made it a priority to drive innovation while maintaining a work environment that was inclusive and empowering. Technova had given him the opportunity to not only lead but to rebuild his own identity outside the shadow of what had happened at Silvertech. Every day, he was reminded of why he had fought so hard to reclaim his dignity. The mentorship program he had spearheaded flourished, expanding beyond his initial vision. More employees signed up as mentors and mentees, creating a web of support across departments. Malik, the intern he had taken under his wing, was rapidly developing into a skilled and confident team member. Their data management optimization project gained recognition across the company, and Malik's name was becoming well known within Technova for his innovative solutions. Seeing Malik thrive filled Derek with a quiet pride, reminding him of why he had chosen to persevere in the face of discrimination. For the first time, he saw his struggle as a journey that transcended personal grievances. He was paving the way for a new generation of diverse professionals who would have the tools and confidence to push boundaries. Meanwhile, his legal team was unearthing disturbing evidence against Silvertech. Former employees had come forward, sharing stories of racial bias, microaggressions, and career roadblocks similar to what Derek had experienced. These testimonies revealed a pervasive culture of subtle but deeply ingrained discrimination that had hindered the careers of talented individuals from diverse backgrounds. With each new revelation, Silvertech's reputation suffered further, and public opinion continued to turn against them. During this time, Derek was invited to speak at various conferences and corporate events about his experience and the importance of diversity in tech. One particular invitation stood out: an annual Diversity and Inclusion Summit hosted by a prominent tech industry association. The invitation felt like a turning point. It was an opportunity for Derek to share his journey with industry leaders and highlight the systemic changes needed to foster true inclusivity. At the summit, Derek stood before an audience of executives, managers, and HR professionals, his heart pounding as he prepared to speak. He began by sharing his story, recounting the humiliation he had faced at Silvertech, the initial despair of losing his career, and the unwavering support of his family and wife, Lauren, who had encouraged him to fight back. His voice was steady, carrying the weight of not only his own experience, but of countless others who had faced similar challenges. "When I was fired, I thought my career was over. I thought that one biased decision would define my future," Derek said, his gaze sweeping across the audience. "But what I've come to realize is that resilience is more powerful than prejudice. The strength to fight back, to reclaim your dignity, and to stand up for what's right. That's what truly defines us." As he spoke, Derek noticed nods of agreement and intense focus from the crowd. He continued, "Companies need to realize that diversity isn't just a checkbox. It's not just about appearances. It's about creating an environment where every individual is valued for their skills and talents, where people don't have to fear judgment based on how they look, where they're from, or what they believe." Derek went on to outline the policies he had implemented at Technova, the mentorship program, the transparent diversity initiatives, and the company's active efforts to build an inclusive culture. He encouraged other companies to look beyond surface-level diversity and instead work towards fostering a true sense of belonging. As he finished his speech, the room erupted in applause. Several attendees approached him afterward, sharing how his words had impacted them and asking for guidance on implementing similar initiatives within their own organizations. Derek felt a deep sense of accomplishment, realizing that his journey had turned into a powerful catalyst for change, influencing an entire industry. But just as he was beginning to feel hopeful, a surprising message arrived. It was from Silvertech's CEO, Robert Lane. The message was brief, requesting a private meeting to discuss matters of mutual importance. Derek was wary. He knew Silvertech was feeling the pressure from the lawsuit and the negative press, but he was determined not to let them manipulate him. After consulting with his lawyer and discussing it with Lauren, he decided to accept the meeting. If nothing else, he could use this opportunity to push for accountability and ensure Silvertech's discriminatory practices were exposed and rectified. A week later, he found himself in a high-rise boardroom with sweeping views of the city, facing Robert Lane and several Silvertech board members. The atmosphere was tense, with an air of quiet desperation among the Silvertech representatives. Lane began by acknowledging the mistakes made by his company, expressing regret over the unfortunate experiences Derek had endured. Derek listened patiently, but he knew this was more about damage control than genuine remorse. Then came the offer, a substantial financial settlement, along with a public statement admitting that mistakes had been made. However, there was one condition. Derek would need to sign a non-disclosure agreement, effectively silencing him from speaking further about his experience at Silvertech. Derek felt his anger flare. This was a blatant attempt to bury the truth, to sweep everything under the rug without addressing the systemic issues that had driven him to this point. He looked directly at Lane, his voice steady but laced with resolve. "With all due respect, Mr. Lane, this isn't about money. This is about accountability. This is about making sure that no one else has to go through what I went through. A public apology without meaningful action is empty. Your company needs to implement real changes, starting with comprehensive diversity and sensitivity training, transparent hiring practices, and a commitment to dismantling the biases within your culture." Lane's expression darkened, but Derek held his ground. He continued, unwilling to consider settling this, but only if Silvertech agrees to concrete measures that will make a difference. You owe it to your employees to create a workplace where they feel valued and respected. The room fell silent as Derek's words sank in. The board members exchanged uneasy glances, clearly uncomfortable with his demands. But Derek could see that Lane understood the precarious position Silvertech was in. The company's reputation was already tarnished, and further resistance would only deepen the damage. After a long pause, Lane finally nodded, albeit reluctantly. "We'll discuss your terms," he said, "and we'll get back to you." Derek left the meeting with a sense of triumph tempered by caution. He knew there was no guarantee that Silvertech would follow through on his demands, but he had taken a stand for the principles he believed in. Whatever happened next, he had made it clear that he wouldn't be silenced, and that he wouldn't settle for anything less than genuine change. Back at Technova, Derek felt a renewed sense of purpose. His fight wasn't just a personal battle anymore. It was a movement, a call for accountability that resonated far beyond the walls of one company. Malik and the other young professionals he mentored looked up to him as a role model, and he took that responsibility seriously, knowing that he was helping shape a future where talent and integrity mattered more than appearances. As the sun set over the city, Derek stood by his office window, reflecting on how far he had come. From the pain of betrayal and dismissal to the heights of leadership and influence, he had carved a path that was uniquely his own. He was no longer a victim of Silvertech's prejudice. He was a leader who had turned adversity into strength, inspiring others to believe in their worth and fight for their rights. The journey wasn't over yet, but Derek was ready for whatever lay ahead. The fight for justice, after all, was never truly finished. But as long as he continued to stand up, to speak out, and to lead by example, he knew he was making a difference, not just for himself, but for everyone who believed in the power of resilience and the possibility of redemption. The legacy of change. In the weeks following his tense meeting with Silvertech's CEO, Derek braced himself for what would come next. He knew that his terms, demanding concrete reforms within Silvertech, had struck a nerve. His demands hadn't just been about policy changes. They had been a direct challenge to the corporate culture that had enabled discrimination. He wasn't interested in letting Silvertech sweep their problems under the rug with a simple financial settlement or public apology. Derek wanted lasting change, something that would benefit future employees who might have faced the same struggles he did. A few days later, Silvertech's board finally agreed to his terms. They would implement mandatory diversity training, review their hiring practices, and make a public commitment to dismantling discriminatory practices within the company. In a statement to the media, Robert Lane acknowledged the need for growth and apologized to Derek and anyone else who may have been mistreated by the company's past policies. It was an apology that hinted at sincerity, though Derek remained wary of how committed they would actually be. Despite his reservations, Derek was glad to see some progress. He knew that this victory was more than just a legal win. It was a shift in corporate accountability. But the journey had taken its toll, and Derek was ready to focus his full energy on his work at Technova, a place where he truly felt valued. Derek's influence within Technova continued to grow. As Senior Director of Innovation, he implemented several new initiatives aimed at fostering an inclusive and collaborative workplace. His story had become a beacon of inspiration within the company, and he often found himself mentoring young employees who were eager to learn from his experience. His mentorship program was flourishing, and Derek made it a point to encourage diversity, empathy, and understanding as core values. Malik, the intern he had taken under his wing, was now a full-time employee and thriving in his role. Under Derek's guidance, Malik had grown into a skilled developer and a confident professional. He often reflected on how Derek's mentorship had shaped his journey, and he frequently credited Derek as his inspiration. But what Derek hadn't realized was that Malik had taken his lessons to heart and had begun mentoring others in the company, paying forward the kindness and support he had received. One day, as Derek sat in his office preparing for an upcoming company-wide presentation, Malik knocked on his door, a look of excitement on his face. "Derek, you're not going to believe this," Malik said, practically bouncing with enthusiasm. Derek looked up, intrigued. "What's up, Malik?" "I just got an invitation to speak at a tech diversity summit next month. They want me to talk about our work on data optimization and the mentorship program you started here. Can you believe it?" Derek's face lit up with pride. "That's incredible, Malik. I couldn't be happier for you. You deserve it." Malik's voice softened, and he looked at Derek with a grateful expression. "Honestly, I couldn't have done this without you. You showed me that it's possible to stand up for yourself and make a difference, no matter what others think. I just want to say, thank you." Derek felt a surge of emotion. Moments like these made everything he had endured worthwhile. "You don't have to thank me, Malik. You did the hard work. I just helped point you in the right direction." Malik smiled, but he shook his head. "You did more than that. You showed me what it means to be resilient, to never back down even when the odds are against you. And because of you, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure others feel supported here too." As Malik left his office, Derek sat in silence, reflecting on the impact he had made. His battle with Silvertech had started as a fight for justice, but it had grown into something larger than himself. He had not only transformed his own life, but had inspired others to pursue their dreams without fear. A few months later, Derek was invited to return to Silvertech, not as an employee, but as a guest speaker at a newly launched diversity and inclusion initiative. He was hesitant, but he knew the symbolic importance of accepting. His victory wasn't just about leaving Silvertech behind. It was about ensuring the company truly changed for the better. By returning, he could make sure his message was heard by those who needed to understand the true cost of discrimination. The day of his visit, Derek walked into Silvertech's headquarters with his head held high. It felt surreal to return to the place that had once brought him so much pain. The last time he had been here, he had been humiliated and fired. Now he was greeted by employees and executives alike, many of whom looked at him with a mixture of admiration and respect. Robert Lane was there to greet him, his demeanor significantly more subdued than it had been during their last encounter. "Derek, I want to thank you for coming. Your story has challenged us to take a hard look at ourselves." Derek gave him a measured nod. "I'm here because I believe in accountability, Robert. Words are easy, but actions are what matter." The room was filled with employees from every level of the company, all gathered to hear Derek speak. As he took the stage, he looked out over the crowd, recognizing some familiar faces among them. He took a deep breath and began to speak. "Today, I'm not here to talk about the past. I'm here to talk about the future," Derek started, his voice carrying the quiet confidence of someone who had overcome unimaginable obstacles. "I'm here because I believe in the power of change. But change doesn't come from words. It comes from actions, from decisions, and from the courage to confront uncomfortable truths." He spoke about the importance of diversity and inclusion, of creating a work environment where every individual felt valued. He didn't hold back, addressing the company's past failures with candor and urging them to do better. "This isn't about me," Derek continued. "It's about every employee who walks through these doors and deserves to be treated with respect and dignity. If Silvertech is truly committed to change, then it starts with every one of you." As he finished, the room erupted into applause. Employees approached him afterward, thanking him for his bravery and sharing how his story had inspired them to stand up against discrimination. After the event, Robert Lane approached Derek one last time. "Your words, they've left an impact. I can't undo the mistakes that were made, but I'm committed to making sure they don't happen again." Derek nodded. "That's all I ever wanted. Just remember, change is a journey, not a destination. It's an ongoing commitment." Returning to Technova, Derek felt a profound sense of peace. He had faced down his past and transformed it into a powerful force for change. His journey was a testament to resilience, a story that had not only shaped him, but had left an indelible mark on everyone around him. Years later, Derek became CEO of Teknova. Under his leadership, the company flourished, not only for its technological innovations, but for its commitment to inclusivity and ethical practices. Derek had built a legacy that extended far beyond his own story, one that would inspire generations to come. As he stood in his office overlooking the city skyline, Derek reflected on the road that had led him here. His past had been filled with pain and betrayal, but he had chosen to turn that pain into purpose. By refusing to give up, he had reclaimed his dignity, uplifted those around him, and proven that even in the face of adversity, justice could prevail. And in that quiet moment, he knew that his journey was far from over. There were still battles to be fought, still lives to touch, and still changes to be made. But he was ready, standing tall, a beacon of hope for all who believed in the power of resilience and the promise of redemption.